Howdy there. This is going to be a bit of a different one. No bubble timings because this week my usual assistant is unavailable and I'm going to be cat sitting for him, so we'll be playing more than usual and not really sitting down and making a video later in this week. This, coupled with the fact that the next patch is almost upon us and about to invalidate all of my current replays, I've scrambled to get this video together while I still have relevant footage. This also means that this will be less edited than usual, and there's generally just going to be some b-roll of matches in the background unless I have a specific thing to show. But now we're meandering away from the point of this video. What matters is that Nami has not been in a great spot for the past few patches, since she has taken multiple direct and indirect nerfs for 3 patches straight, although the consolation I suppose is that this upcoming patch doesn't look to touch her at all, and should hopefully be the death of Ash support, but the revival of Yumi could also be a problem. Either way though, the damage has been done. We've returned to the days of being flamed by our team for picking Nami, and I've even had enemies all chat complain about how their support is less useful than a Nami because they recognise now how bad of a pick she just is. At the start of the season, I had a bad time with the nerfs. If I recall correctly, there was a time where I was approaching a 40% win rate with Nami. However, I was confused since when I picked something else, because of circumstances such as Nami being banned, games felt much easier. Everyone copes now and then about how they're not washed up, but given games were so much harder on Nami than on other picks, something felt wrong, and so began the process of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. I'm gonna just skip to what I landed on. Here on screen now is the short version of my build and items. Pause now if you want to read, because I'm going to move on to the point of this video. And that is why I think Tidecaller's Blessing is the way to go in Season 13. I'm going to try to keep this free of OTP cope, because while Nami may be weak, it doesn't really help if we just still want to play Nami. The other caveat I'd like to specify before we start is that this is what has allowed me to find success in higher elo. I don't know whether this works in the lower ranks, so while I am recommending it, I'd say to try it in a few normal games and see how you like it. So obviously it is no secret that the way that Nami does the most damage is if she maxes E. Here's the comparison if you need to see it. Of course this is subject to change if Riot wants to adjust Nami in the future, but for now, here are the numbers. I've ignored the AP ratios because it needlessly complicates matters, but even if you have AP, the following factors mean it's irrelevant to what we're about to discuss. So Nami doesn't have very good AP utility ratios. Her W heal has a 0.25 ratio and her E slow has a 1% per 20 AP ratio. Neither of these really matter, especially not early. Her damage AP ratios are okay, but E has a slightly higher damage AP ratio than her W does, so because E has a better base and scaling damage, it is the spell that pretty much always does more damage. Yes, this can change situationally, such as on a bounce of W when we have more than 200 AP, but there's always the chance that not all stacks of E are used in the cast, but generally E does more damage. So damage should generally always be better with an E max, but I don't think this raw damage is all that matters. I think it's 3 more things. The utility of a stronger slow on E is preferable to the healing from W. The lower mana cost allows you to forego heavy investment into mana. And then lastly, E is targeted burst damage. So why do I think that a stronger slow is better than the healing of W? Well, for one, Nami doesn't actually heal that much, and the amount that she gains from putting points into her W is also not that much. Per rank of W, it gets about 36% stronger compared to the level 1 value, and it costs about 14% more mana. The amount of sustain that a W gives doesn't really significantly outpace the increased mana cost, and the sustain only actually matters early in the laning phase. As we all know, if Nami is trying to behave like a Soraka in the mid or late game, she just burns through all her mana and is unable to do anything. So early on, when you don't have many points into W, you're not really losing much sustain, and then later off, a W max falls off hard. So at most, W matters before level 6, where you'll have a maximum of 3 points into it. So compared to the base value, you spend 20 extra mana to heal for 40 more HP, and that's not really a lot. It doesn't nullify poke, and it'll rarely stop you dying to an all-in. There's also the fact that if we are attempting to use W to sustain while it is our main skill, as soon as the enemy sees us put it on cooldown, if they are competent, they'll look to punish the cooldown and we have to concede for the next 9 or so seconds. When maxing E, we don't have that problem. We do need to be a little bit more careful about our positioning to make sure that we're not losing all our HP playing how we normally would, since we don't sustain quite as well, but as discussed, I don't think Nami sustain is actually that much better when maxing W. Sticking to the utility argument, the strength of the slow is pretty useful once skilled up, since it allows you and your allies to have an easier time kiting or catching enemies, or landing skill shots such as bubble. We all know how hard it is to land bubble, especially against good opponents or mobile champions, and this is a part of why I think maxing E is so successful. Maxing E means you keep up with and potentially outpace the rate enemies gain move speed throughout the game through levels and items, and still land those bubbles. Bubble is a medium range AoE stun on a basic ability that cannot be avoided by hiding behind other units. The whole reason it is difficult to land is because it is an otherwise very strong spell, so if E-maxing really does allow us to land it more frequently, yeah, that's pretty good. The mana cost of E scales better, so you aren't necessarily running into the mana problems you would when maxing W, and particularly lately now that Riot have decided to nerf the mana granted by spell thieves and lengthened the time before you get the final upgrade. This lowers mana consumption in the mid-game and allows for greater success with builds that have more AP but less mana regen. Now, some of you listening along that know what I've said previously might be thinking, hang on, I thought you said that AP builds aren't optimal for Nami. You'd be correct, I did previously think that, and I'm unsure if this is applicable for lower ranks, if circumstances have changed, or if I was just wrong. I'm not trying to speak definitively because I genuinely do not know. However, for me, at the rank I am currently, this is what has allowed me to actually win games, and I'm just putting this out there. Sure, Nami still doesn't have amazing AP ratios, but even AP items give a decent amount of CDR, and AP builds offer a bit more game agency. The only thing I think you miss out on compared to enchanter items is that you fall short of the 84 haste mark, which is required for the 6-second cooldown on E. Nami's standard core typically has Spell Thieves, Mandate, and Lucidity Boots, which is pretty cheap and allows for some pricier purchases for the final 3 items, especially since I tend to go for Wardstone as a final item since it gives a lot for just 1100 gold. This is why if we go back to the item build I showed before, we can afford to go for the pricier but objectively better upgrade to Oblivion Orb, and we can potentially go for Banshees or Hourglass instead of a more supportive item. And since we're maxing E, our mana pool can keep up, so we have greater agency overall. The third benefit of E is that it is targeted and it is burst damage. To explain why that's so much better, let's consider a champion like Ezreal. Ezreal does a lot of damage throughout a game, and it is not rare at all for him to top the damage to champion's chart for a game. But is he really useful? Is he getting kills in skirmishes? Is he winning lane? More often than not, not really. Poke is nice, but it's easy to play around generally, and it's pretty clear when a poke champion is threatening. In fact, it is kind of rare for Ezreal to really get kills with Q. It's instead the burst damage from his ult when someone is retreating, or W plus E. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with a poke champion not getting kills and only poking enemies out of lane, since leads can be gained from forcing bad recalls, denying farm, tower plates, etc. But the point is that if we're maxing W as Nami, our damage is just too insignificant to really kill opponents and win lane 2v2, or successfully get picks in skirmishes. The latter is especially true, since if we're rotating to a fight with a jungler or to another lane, there is no option to slowly win trades through poke and sustain with W, we have to commit to a fight with 1 to 3 spell rotations at most, and E provides more value there. Burst damage gets kills, but so does being able to focus damage onto a particular target. This is a problem for us as Nami when we're maxing W, since we don't get to control who W bounces to, and since we're usually bouncing our W in lane because of how positioning works in trades. For example, with a Lucian dashing forward to dump his combo, this lowers the amount of damage that W deals. But in general, it's also a problem for winning lane because spreading poke evenly on the enemy bot lane duo is not as important as chunking out one target. If both targets are at 70% HP, things are more or less okay for them, but if one is healthy while the other is at 40%, well, that's generally a problem for them since they have to position further back, and that means that the enemy breaks their parallel positioning, meaning they lose short trades since the healthy champion is 1v2. The enemy cannot easily commit to a fight since one of them is too weak to fight, and the enemy bot lane is at risk of how much damage the low HP champion can actually take, since if they take more and die or are forced out of lane, the remaining champion is in danger of multiple negative scenarios. Don't forget that W isn't the only way that you and your ADC can heal. For example, you can use your prio to get honey fruit from river, or you can take a temporary reset to heal to full, and then trap the enemy in lane on low HP. There are a lot of ways you can play around the increased damage from a Emax, but you can't really just get more damage when maxing W. The final note on E's damage is that it doesn't just apply to champions. Unlike W, it is useful when we're trying to shove a minion wave or trying to kill a jungle monster. This leads to us being quicker at taking neutral objectives, allowing us to speed up an ally taking a jungle camp, or just shove a minion wave faster for a tempo advantage. So yeah, maybe I am delusional and clinging desperately onto whatever has allowed me to huff some hopium that Nami isn't dead, but I'm not sure. It's not like I wasn't maxing E most of the time before the nerfs of 13.1b, and I know I wasn't the only one. I'm not saying this is going to be the better playstyle for everyone. Even if you look at the stats at Emax, it performs like 2 to 3% better than W, but with a lower sample size, which you can put down to it being something only done by dedicated Nami mains situationally, meaning in a broader sense it could just be worse. I don't know. These past 2 weeks since I changed things up and started maxing E, my games have gone a lot smoother. I'd encourage you, if you're listening to me right now, go try and see how you like it. Not to do the YouTube thing, I won't say the phrase because it's a little bit cringe, but like I said in the intro, I'm probably going to be playing a bunch in the week after this video comes out and gathering a fair few VODs on stream while I try push GM. If you want to see how I play and make this work, then stay tuned, and my Twitch is in my socials if you're not already following. Come keep me company, but either way, I hope that at the very least you have fun with an Emax. Have a lovely day.